Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dojo Talks. Today, we are talking about the upcoming World Championship that starts this Monday. It's going to start with 3 games and there's going to be a rest day. It's being played in Singapore. We're going to talk about it all today. The first question we're going to talk about is the simple one. Do we think this is a World Championship, David?
Yes. You've got the current world champion, who obviously has some asterisks on his match with Nepo, but there's nobody closer to being world champion than Ding at this point, right? So, he's there. It's the FIDE World Championship match. He's the defending champion to some extent. And then you've got Gukesh, who won the candidates ahead of basically anyone else who would be in this match at this point. So even if you put asterisks on Ding, Gukesh is clearly the challenger for the World Championship match. There's nobody ahead of these guys who's more legitimate or should be in the match. It's going to be a reasonably big match with a reasonably big prize fund, and it may not be exactly what we want. Everyone might have a different format or sense of who should qualify and how, but it's definitely what we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a little bit offensive to even ask this question, in my opinion, a little bit disrespectful to ask if this is a world championship match. History will tell, but right now it definitely is. And we got to respect Ding and Gukesh. Ding holds the title. And as we learned from our latest series, ranking all the world championship matches of all time, there's a couple of times been the case that the world's strongest player was not holding the world championship title, sometimes for a couple of years, and that's just part of the game. Magnus isn't running his own matches, against Nigel Short and Vishy Anand to kind of contest FIDE's hold over the title. So,
right,
yeah, right now FIDE has the title. Ding holds it. I think Gukesh is going to try to take it from him, and absolutely world championship match. Jesse, what do you think?
At the time, one little piece of info to bolster what Kostya says. At the time of the Ding versus Nepo match, I believe they were ranked number 2 and 3 in the world.
They were.
With only Magnus higher, and he had specifically withdrawn from it and did not say anything like, this isn't a world championship and that's why I won't participate. He just said something along the lines of, I'm tired, the format's like draining, I'd rather play rapid chess. So I'm out, and these two can play the world championship match. He didn't say anything insulting or disparaging them. So that was the world championship match. And our general tradition of world championships is, if you're the defending champion, you're the defending champion, regardless of what your rating is, right? So, yeah, I don't quite see where the question comes from, but Jesse, tell us.
Well, okay. I just want to say the reason it's an interesting question for me, and I don't have a clear answer, but this is the reason it's an interesting question. Okay, so there was a little moment we had when we did our tier ranking of all the world championships. We went all through them, and we were, I didn't actually think any of them, the millennials have this thing from S tier to trash that we were using.
Right.
And I didn't really feel any of them were trash. But what happened when we came to the Ding Nepo match is I had a moment where I was like, wait a second, is this even on the list? Is this even on the list? And a lot of people in the comments were really mad. They're like, dude, that was a great match. It turned me on to chess and yada, yada. And I'm hopeful that this match will also be like that. There was definitely some great storylines to that match.
Yeah.
But it was very questionable to me whether it was a world championship, just because it's, there's the GOAT is out there and he isn't dethroned. So how can you even talk about it being a world championship? Now with this one, let me just give a historical perspective on it. Imagine, first of all, we have the whole thing with Morphy, right? So they wouldn't play a world championship match until he was basically dead. This is something that was just like a historical background to the world championship. Imagine it just as a test case, that after this match is played, Magnus comes and plays a match. It doesn't even have to be called the world championship. First of all, I think all the fans would agree that that is, in fact, a world championship. And second of all, if Magnus won, whether it was Ding he was playing or Gukesh, we would all say, oh, he was champion the whole time. Or at least mini fans would say it. At least mini fans would say
Wait. Okay. Sorry. Make it clear. Who's Magnus playing in this scenario where Magnus comes back and plays a match? Like, is he playing Arjun or Farrugia still because that's who he's into? Or is he playing the winner of this match?
Yeah, let's just say he plays the winner of this match. Just imagine. I'm not saying
Magnus played a huge match against the winner of this match.
Right.
And won it.
Right.
You're saying, would that then make him the world champion?
Well, I think what would happen, this is just the reason I'm bringing this up, right? And it just affects this question of whether we see this as a world champion, is if he won that match convincingly, I think a lot of us would say, oh, well, he never lost the title, right? Now, I get it. From a legalistic framework, you guys are absolutely right. But one of the interesting things about the World Championship is it's really the fans who ultimately decide who the world champion is. For example, when we talked about the World Championship through the 90s, we all agreed that Kasparov was the champion, even though in a legalistic sense, the FIDE champs or chumps were champions too. But the fans basically said, no, those guys weren't champions. Give me a break. Right?
Yeah, I don't think that either Kostya Kavutskiy is like extremely legalistic. If Magnus played a 20-game match against the winner of this match, and FIDE didn't call it the World Championships, but they, hired seconds and played really hard, played 20 games of classical chess together, I think we would understand that the winner of that match would be the next world champion. However, me personally, and then we'll pass it to you, Kostya, but me personally, I wouldn't say that meant that Gukesh or Ding hadn't been world champion in between.
Right.
It might be, to my mind, more like when Max Euwe was world champion for 2 years, even though he beat Alyekhin, but you could still say Alyekhin was the best player in the world from whatever, 1927 to 1940. But somebody else was world champion in between. And I would say, yes, there was still, if you talked about eras, you could still say the Magnus era was from, 2008 to 2028 or whatever it might end up being, right?
Right.
But I would say that within the Magnus era, there was like a period where somebody else was the world champion.
Okay.
And that's how I would see that.
Now, I don't want to make a huge case on this. I just thought it's an interesting question. We have, I think it's world number 3 now, playing world number 23. Definitely Euwe was not one of the I don't know. He wasn't he wasn't at the very top, but he made it. He won the match, right? But
he was probably number 3 or 4.
Yeah, so definitely not 23. So that's the other thing about this match that's so weird. And we'll talk more about Ding and his circumstances as we get into it.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, Ding is not the number 23 player in the world. I think it's a little bit short-sighted to just call him that.
No, he's the number 23 player in the world.
Yeah, but he's the former number 2 player in the world who's now number 23. That's a little bit different than someone who's like who's number 22 on the
I totally agree. We're going to
Neiman.
I think we'll totally get into it because we're going to talk about Ding and his circumstances, right?
So yeah, definitely it's it's Ding's title. I agree with a lot of what David said. And in terms of this hypothetical where Magnus comes back and then defeats Gukesh in a classical match, this hasn't happened, right? So it's unfair to be like, oh, is this a world championship match before this like hypothetical has even happened? So I agree with David. I think it's clear to everyone involved that Magnus is the number 1 player in the world. But he gave up the title. So that's how it works. After Kasparov lost to Kramnik in 2000, I'm sure a lot of people still considered Kasparov the number 1 player in the world. He had the highest rating until he retired. And let's say he came back and defeated Kramnik in the return match in 2004, whenever, we wouldn't say that, oh, he was actually world champion from 2000 to 2004. Well, and the fact that he lost the title, that doesn't count because he was the strongest player the whole time.
Oh, okay. But there's a critical difference, and that is that Kasparov actually lost. Magnus never lost. That's a huge difference.
It's different, but it's not in the sense that Magnus gave up the title. So if you give up the title, I think that's pretty similar to losing it. It's not the same. You didn't lose it in a match, but you did lose the title. Okay.
I don't want to get so hung up on it. I just want to say that question is hanging over this match, right?
Let me ask this question. Yeah. Who was world champion in 1975? We would say it was Karpov, but Fischer was probably the number 1 player in the world still.
Yeah.
But it's not how it goes. You give the title up. You give the title up. Now world champion.
Okay. Yeah. And let me just say, if Magnus continues to just drop out and retire, then what history is going to say is we're just going to move on from you, Magnus. Buddy, are you listening? We're going to move on from you. It's not about you anymore. You need to come back and defend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, it's not even clear that Magnus would win a match in 2025 against Gukesh. Far from clear.
Right.
Dude's not even showing up for Wake on Zay. I saw the lineups for Wake on Zay. So he's like not even going to try and battle Gukesh and Arjun and Fabi in, for one of the sort of grand slams, right, of like top chess classical tournaments. So it's getting more and more tenuous or hypothetical to talk about Magnus being the best, honestly.
Okay, that's totally fair. That's totally fair. We're going to talk more about performance ratings later, and that'll come up then too, I think.
Yeah, Magnus now, I mean, he's like switching over to freestyle chess. I saw they released a list of tournaments for next year. They're going to do like 5 big freestyle events, the Fisher Random. I assume Magnus is going to play a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know, he's very excited about it.
Not to get sidetracked right away, but we want to follow the flow. Did you guys see Magnus versus Fabi today?
No.
I did not.
No.
You know, they're playing a 2-game exhibition because Singapore, the Singapore Chess Federation tried to make a whole festival out of the World Championships and all kinds of programming and special events. And one of them is a Magnus Fabi 2-game match. I was up in the middle of the night watching it. They played a sort of classical freestyle game. They've got another one tomorrow. Yeah, epic, exciting. I'm glad Magnus is doing that.
Yeah, I'm glad Magnus is on scene in Singapore. You know, just in case someone ends up, I don't know, dropping out at the last second. You know, and then Magnus is there, Emil is there. He can be like, hey, Magnus, you know, we've got the prize fund. You're here.
Yeah.
You know, no one's prepped for you. No one prepped for you.
Right. So it doesn't matter if you didn't prep. It's perfect for you. It's like the normal format minus any prep.
I don't think the fans would be upset, you know, to Jesse's point, if that ended up happening. I just want to float it out there, you know.
Oh, they'd be pumped. They'd be pumped, which is an insulting thing to say, but it's the truth.
Okay, maybe we should then go into
let's talk about the basics of the event.
Elephant.
Yeah.
Oh, the basics.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple things. It's interesting because we talked a lot about the various formats in our series on the World Championships. And so they have every time they change it a little bit. But so it's going to be 12 games, right? And if that's undecided after 12, it's going to go to tie
14
breaks.
games.
14 games, excuse me, right. 14. And then its schedule's a little bit more hot. There were more rest days before, and now they get a rest day after every third day of play, so not as many. I think that's maybe a good thing. Time control's a little faster. To me, it's not absurdly fast, though. It's 90 moves in 40 minutes with the 30-second delay. Then you get another 30 minutes for the rest of the game.
Wait, sorry, I'm reading. It's 2 hours for 40 moves, and then 30 minutes for the rest of the game.
Sorry. And then before, what happened was they got another 15 at move 60, but they don't get that anymore.
They got rid of that, yeah. So just the 30-second increment per move. Oh, starting with move 41. So no increment for the first 2 hours.
Yeah. That's where I got that thing about, it's basically, 90 plus 30 for the first because you don't get the increment. Right.
So flag fest. Yeah, we could see someone flagging.
Yeah, they love that. Now, me and David, if you haven't watched our series, we're a little bit upset that this is kind of shortish, but still 14 games. It's going to be a great match. And then the other really interesting thing about it, to my mind, is the way they've structured the prize fund. Before, back in the day, it would be like the winner gets this much, loser gets that much. Now it's structured so that it's a $2.5 million prize fund. And if you win a game, you get $200,000, right? So every time you win, you get $200,000. Then the remainder, let's say you win one game, so you get $200,000 from the pot, then the remainder will be split. But it creates a huge incentive if you're winning some to keep going, to win even more, right?
Or even if you've lost the match, right?
Even if you've lost,
even if you don't feel like you can make back a 3-point deficit or whatever,
right?
You can still make $200,000 in a day.
Yeah. So I think that's cool. And it seems like this prize fund is also larger than it has been in the past. And when we look at our history of World Championships, the prize fund has been one of the key deciding things going on in these back smoky rooms. That's always been critical to whether the match happens or not. And so that's a cool part that they got some money. We'll talk about the sponsor, I think, in a little bit.
let me clarify
Okay.
before this next comment that I don't enjoy being a grouch. I don't want to be a grouch. But I disagree with you, Jesse. I don't like the prize money incentive here. I think it might be a great idea for a lot of tournaments. Maybe we could talk about that now or another day. But for the World Championship, the point of the World Championship is to win the match. Like putting secondary incentives out there is weird and silly. That has nothing to do with the tradition of a World Championship match. And then, of course, I don't like faster time controls. Every time they remove 1 minute from the World Championships, I'm grouchy. Every time they remove a game from the World Championship match, I'm grouchy. So, yeah, I mean, I don't like any of the direction that this is going. I mean, if somebody had this great idea, they should have applied it to a tournament about the prize money, right? Set up a tournament with the top 10 players playing the Sinkfield Cup and tell them, we've got $1 million for this tournament and it's being divided based on wins. And then, you play 9 draws in a row and you walk away with, whatever, a free hotel room.
Yeah.
And some dude's going to win 2 games and pocket $1 million because everybody else drew every game. Fine. Try it out there, but not here.
Yeah. So I'm with David. By the way, the match is longer this time. So it was like 12 game matches.
Right.
For a little while. And then I think Ding Nepo was also 14, but it made it a little bit longer. And yeah, I don't like the prize thing either. I feel like it's a weird incentive. I understand why they're doing it. They want to encourage more decisive games, but yeah, number one, you need to like kind of test this outside of a World Championship match. You can't just like try it. And number two, it is a weird incentive. Why not? Like, let's just give players money for playing a gambit. If you play a gambit, you get an extra $10,000. It's a little pokery. There's like incentives outside the actual game, outside the actual match.
Yeah.
Or so
or like if you draw with the Bong Cloud in the World Championship, you like unlock an extra $5,000 bonus or something stupid. Like we don't want that.
Yeah, we definitely don't want that. That's an extra step, but it's kind of heading that direction. So that to me is a bit weird. I am excited about the host. I mean, it's being hosted in Singapore, and Google is a sponsor. That's interesting. We should definitely discuss that. That's kind of I don't think that's happened before. But the Singapore seems like a great host. Like they're running all these side events, as David said. They've got like this big open tournament. They had the 960 thing. So that seems to be exciting. It also just seems to be exciting venue. I don't think we've had a World Championship in Singapore before. So maybe always good. I feel like to open up new countries and places.
Yes, definitely.
Let me just say, I just want to briefly say with the money thing, I think it's kind of fun. I think the incentive is definitely to win the match, and I don't think they're going to be too moved by it. But just imagine a situation where it does turn into some kind of blowout. And then, you're up a bunch of games, and then what would be the strategy? To just draw it to the end, draw every single game. Screw that. No. Let's keep going.
So that's an interesting question. I would wonder if Gukesh is up, I don't know, +2 or 3. Is he going to try to keep winning just for the 200K? I feel like his job is going to be to win the match, and that's what I don't think it would really affect. I feel like if he's leading the match and Ding, I don't know, resigns and is happy to draw it out, Gukesh will also be happy to just draw it out and become world champion.
Well, we'll talk about Gukesh in a second. I have my own sense of how he's going to approach in this match, but any case, that's the counter argument. I won't fight too much. I do think it's kind of interesting.
Winning the match also gets you a return match right now, which is worth approximately $1 to $1.3 million, right? So to go out of your way to try and win one more game and risk that, I think, trying to just make it to the next match is worth so much.
Well, you don't get a return match. You get into the next tournament, right?
No, I'm saying if you win this match, you know that you get to play the next match, right? Yeah. So and then in that next match, your expectation is you'll get at least $1 million in that match, right?
Right.
So to what risks would you take trying to win 200,000 in a single game versus just draw it out and make it to the next match? Right?
I'm just saying, if you're +3, it's going to be on your mind when you're +3. You know, I mean, like, I want to end this match now, and I want to make some extra money. Anyways, I think it's a small thing.
I think that's a good question. I think we should go there. Do you guys think this is going to be a blowout? Because we looked at a lot of world championship matches recently in history.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to learn that quite a few of them were actually just complete wipeouts. We haven't had one in recent times because players are normally very, very tight. But this is the first match in recent memory that I can recall where it does feel like there's just a heavy favorite going into it.
Wait, wouldn't we say that Carlsen Nepo was a blowout?
Carlsen Nepo was kind of the modern version of a blowout, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, okay. It ended up being a big wash for Carlsen. Going into it, we definitely weren't expecting that. That it was going to be a lot. And also the match was very close for the first 5.5 games.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, if you're asking for a blowout, like you're not going to get like a Lasker Janowski, right? Like the level is just too high now, right? I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe
Jesse
thinks
Well, I think Janowski's actually a really important person to bring up because Janowski was an incredibly talented player who could psychologically blow up. And that's what happened not only in that event, but when he played New York 1924, he also blew up in a couple other events, right?
Yeah.
Something was going on with his mind. We don't know exactly what. Yeah. So that brings us really to this question about Ding's state and what we think of it. Because yes, it can be a blowout. And it's not necessarily going to be because of his playing strength, but whatever ailments he's got going on that have been bedeviling him the last couple of years. Right.
Sure. But I still want to redefine blowout. Like blowout in the modern age is going to be different than a blowout 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like you're not going to see somebody win 5 games in a row, period. And you had the losers of matches sometimes win 5 games in a row 120 years ago, then go on to lose 5 games in a row twice after winning 5 games in a row. So I think with the modern match, and as short as it is, right? Like a 14-game match that gets cut off if someone gets to 7.5. Like a blowout is winning by 4 games. That's a huge blowout.
Yeah,
at this point.
plus 3 or 4.
It's hard to imagine worse than that. Like if this match ended 7.5, 3.5 after 11 games, right? You've got more than double the other guy's score. That's a huge blowout. And yeah. So I think if we ask, is it going to be a blowout? You have to say, like, is it going to be more than +3?
Right.
Even +3, you could argue.
+3, to me, that's a blowout. To me, that's a blowout. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, +3. That's a big sweep. So yeah, I guess the question for you guys is like, is that what you're expecting, or do you think it'll be closer?
I'll go with +3. Yeah, +3 or 4 for Gukesh. That's my prediction. But now that we're into it, let me just say a couple things that were just about my intuition here. I think, let's say that Ding was a player who had never been 2 or 3 in the world, right? Then I would say this guy's got absolutely no chance. But the weird thing is, once you've already been at that level, then at least for my intuition, I'm like, well, it's totally possible for you to regain that level. We've just seen that in other players too, especially like older players. Let's say Kasparov, for example. If he came back and started playing competitively, he wouldn't be able to consistently perform. But like you saw in the recent 960 thing, the guy is playing, he's still able on a given day to play amazing chess, right? Even though he's an older dude now. So what I'm trying to say is we have to talk about what we ever can speculate is going on wrong with Ding's situation, but it's totally possible for him to be able to go back to where he was. In which case it would be a very competitive match. But if he's performing on the level of the last couple of years, then forget about it. It's going to be a blowout. And so far, I haven't seen anything to suggest that it's like there's something that's changed for him. But, it's possible.
I mean, one thing that's changed is he played a lot more in 2024 than he did in 2023. That's one little change. I mean, it didn't necessarily go great for him, but he made the effort to put himself at the board again and again.
though he didn't make an effort to play Gukesh.
Right, except when his team got paired with India at the Olympiad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ding has been there before, and the big question is just whether he can return to his former self. The tricky thing is that he just hasn't shown anything impressive lately, right? Like I don't think he's had like a good performance since winning the World Championship. Ironically, I mean, I feel like he must have played better in that match than he's played since the match.
Yeah,
because I mean, he ended up winning and not like losing all the games. It's funny, again, we were looking back at all these World Championship matches. I was reading a lot of stuff about like what the pundits were thinking at the time of the match, like Alekhine Oive and Botvinnik Tal and all these big matches. And now it's just cool to do that here. Like we're now the pundits that are calling the shots.
Right,
and
right.
Maybe Ding shows up in his former self, but like there just hasn't been any visible evidence that he can still play at that level. Like something happened. He's either, I don't know, he's just got this like crazy depressive super slump going on. And it's like, we were talking about his performance rating this year, and I think it's like under 2,700, which is still actually very impressive. I got to say, like the fact that he's in the worst slump of his career and he's still playing like sub 2,700, but still very, very strong grandmaster level, shows you how strong he must have been given the distance that he's fallen. And I'm sure a lot of people are maybe calling it for Ding or thinking Ding will win, but right now it's just like there's like no reason to believe that he can play at Gukesh's level. So knowing what we know at this time right now, after the match, who knows what's going to happen? People are going to call us out for our horrible predictions once again. But knowing what we know right now, there's no way to not consider Gukesh just the massive favorite.
Yeah. One thing, actually, I want to introduce some research that David did here. So in the previous World Championship match, we had friend of the dojo chess numbers on Twitter, and he would always do a calculation just based on the rating difference. And a small rating difference goes a long way. So for example, David ran the numbers for this match, and I think he came up, he'll tell us if I'm wrong, but 6-8 in Gukesh's favor would be the predicted result.
Based on their current FIDE ratings. It's very similar, by the way, to Carlsen Nepo. They were about 55 points apart. And I remember at the time you were surprised when Chess Numbers told you that 55 points actually means there's like a 90% chance or 87% chance that Carlsen wins the match.
Exactly. Right.
And that he's supposed to win it by like 2 full points. And you were like, whoa, 55 points means that much.
Right. And so let me add before I hand it to you, David. So one of the things that was cool about that is the longer the match goes, obviously, it's obvious in hindsight, but to me, it was really telling that the longer the match goes, the more that 50 points tells. And let me just say why it's a little surprising, because I've played a lot of chess in my life. And when I face somebody that's 50 points higher than me, that's basically, it feels the same. If I face somebody who's 150 points higher than me, it's like, oh God, now we're dealing with a monster, right? But 50 points, it's not in my head or anything, whatever. The other thing that David did, he's going to tell us now, he hasn't told us, but we are going to do a podcast at some point about performance ratings. And so basically, when you look at Magnus's rating, for example, he's still carrying his past successes with him from years ago, right? But if you did it like other sports where you count the more recent results more strongly than you count the results from 5 years ago, 10 years ago even, then you get different numbers. And so in this case, for example, Ding's rating is going to be well below 2,700 performance for the last year, and Gukesh's is going to be much higher, and that's going to give us a different predicted result than the 6-8 thing. So David, what do you got?
Let me first comment on what you said about the length of the match. Even though it should be relatively obvious, just in general, that the longer a match goes, the more the favored player, they've got a better chance of recovering from a mistake or showing their superiority. That's generally obvious, let's say. But to give you a sense of why the 50 points, 55 points hasn't scared you in the past, even if you played 5 games between players with that difference, the expected advantage is not even a full point, right? Like they're expected to score like 2.9 versus 2.1. So it's not even expected to be 3-2 fully.
Right.
Like a win in 4 draws is already slightly better than they should expect. So if you're considering just playing 1 game with them, their advantage is kind of like being white.
Right.
Now, if you're white and they're black, it's basically a toss-up. That's about the difference between white and black, is just about 50 points, and we're talking 55 points. Now, if they've got white and 50 points, you might start to feel it a little. But
right.
Anyway, so that gives a sense of like how many games it takes for it to really come in. So yeah, with their current ratings, if their current ratings were accurate, which I think is not really the question of this match. The question is Gukesh better than his rating? Is Ding worse than his rating? Can Ding suddenly play at his top rating again, which was like 28-15? It would make it really close. If we use the numbers they have, yeah, it comes out to an expectancy of 8-6, a 2-game win. And that's about what the expectancy was between Magnus and Nepo. But then, of course, when Nepo got behind, he kind of lost it a little bit, right? And so Magnus got an extra point or two out of that. With Gukesh and Ding, if we look at their performance ratings, I'm giving Ding a generous 2,700 for the last year.
Okay.
And I imagine it's a bit lower, but I didn't have the time to calculate it out precisely. So I just adjusting him to 2,700. Very generous, definitely below that. And for Gukesh, I'm giving him 2,820.
Okay.
Again, I know his performance is over 2,800 and probably less than 2,850. I think he's somewhere between 2,800 and 2,850 and probably very, very close to Magnus in performance rating. So if you put in those numbers, 2,820 and 2,700, then suddenly your expectancy is 2/3 for the higher rated player and 1/3 for the lower rated player out of every game. That means within one game, 2 games, you're feeling it already. And your expectation for the match, if they played 14 games, which they wouldn't, would be 9.3 versus 4.7. So you'd be expected to score like 9.5 points. But that means the match would be over before they got there. And the match would probably be cut off at something around 8-4. Like 7-4 going into the 12th game and he wins it and then it's done at 8-4. Or it could be done in the 11th game at something like 7.5, 4.5. So when you're talking, that's where you get into like the 3 or 4 points, the blowout, the finishing the match early, people asking, should I buy a ticket for the 13th or 14th game?
Yeah.
Are wondering about this. And this scenario is medium likely. You know, I told somebody they could very, very safely buy a ticket for the 10th game, probably for the 11th game. But if you're talking game 13 or 14, then I think this is a very possible scenario.
Right.
Personally.
Yeah, I think if it's 7-4, that next game is going to be a draw. It's so... or not, you never know. You never know.
I mean, these are just numbers, if they were playing any other tournament or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so Guki, big favorite.
Yeah. I think those numbers are very conservative.
Yeah. Because he's
right now.
Yeah, I think it's more like 2,650 at least for Ding, the performance rating.
It might be more like 2,670 versus 2,835 or something like that. But I was just a little bit calm and careful about it, just to show you partly how it explodes if you add a few more points to the 55.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, that's amazing. I say we also, back in the day, for example, the USCF used to give you a youth bonus. So if you played well as a kid, it would give you bonus points. And I don't know if we need that, but what it's telling is that in this situation with Gukesh, he kind of, in my head, gets youth bonus points. So he is, whereas Ding, I don't think he might improve his psychological form, but his chess understanding isn't going to go through the roof in a couple months, whereas Ding is improving every month. So I just feel like he's getting stronger and stronger, right? And he's got a great team behind him too. Yeah.
You guys see any weaknesses in Gukesh? Any place where you would see room for Ding to win the match?
Well, here's a couple things. I don't know if this is a weakness, but a couple things that we just got to point out with Gukesh that are really interesting. The guy is willing to get into time trouble, and he's going to use that time to calculate like a madman. So far, it's gone his way. But time pressure is a fiend for any player. And so could that end up backfiring? That's one of my questions for the match, right? The other thing about it is that I think, we'll see if I'm right on this, but I think his team is going to say, go out and try to win even as black, right? Traditional strategy, it is not. But the same thing with the time control, the going into time pressure, that's also not traditional. And I think it would be a wise thing to do. It's the way he plays already. I don't think he knows even how to play for a draw. A lot of players don't know how to play for a draw. And I think he's going to actually try to win as black. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on the match and would make the match a lot more exciting as well. It makes it so as well that there's no easy games for Ding. It makes it too that if he wins as black, that lack of confidence that Ding is already feeling could just be crushing immediately. So I think those are two aspects, very aggressive aspects of the way Ding is playing these days that I think could potentially backfire, but I don't think I don't think those are reasons that he's changed the way he's playing.
Yeah, I feel like I don't really see Gukesh having any weaknesses. He can definitely lose the match. One scenario would be if Ding shows up in reasonably good form and Gukesh is maybe a bit overconfident and he pushes too hard, trying to win some games early on and then ends up losing. I think that could definitely happen. I feel like that's just unlikely, but you never know. I mean, I'm sure no one seems immune to nerves in general, but I think Gukesh is like too strong for the nerves to affect him that much. So it's like, I don't know. I think it's, as long as he can just like stay calm, stay relaxed, which he seems to be very good at during critical moments. I mean, his like two greatest events were the candidates and the Olympiad, like the two most important tournaments of the year. So as long as he can just continue to stay calm during critical moments, he seems pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, and those were the two most important tournaments of his life, right, Kostya? Like, the most pressure he's ever been under was probably the candidates. So that's the data we have that he handled it well. And the second most pressure was probably the Olympiad, right? Where there were sky high expectations. That was his first time playing as like a favorite, right?
And he also crushed it in the India Olympiad in 2022 when he was on I think board one there as well.
Yeah.
So
but there he was B team and there wasn't as much pressure and expectation going into it, right? But he was also like really a little kid. He was 16.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think that was already a sign because I mean he had he beat Caruana that event, like he had a huge tournament, still like on board one. It's always huge.
Let me say a little word about this playing to win as black thing, because what I've seen him do in all these past tournaments is play some very spicy, debatable moves. The big one, of course, was H6 in the Nimzo against Abasov. Me and David screamed when we saw it. We thought it was the nastiest thing we'd ever seen. He goes on to win the game. I hope it's not H6 on that level of weird. But the point I'm trying to make is when you try to win as black at this level, that's the kind of move that you're kind of going to be looking for to throw your opponent completely off and get a struggle from the very beginning. And so that's of course, though, something that can backfire.
I mean, it's not the only way to win, though. There's, chess is complicated and there's 1,000 tools out there, right? I mean, you could aim for 10 equal endgames in a row and try and grind your opponent out occasionally, including the black games, right? There's lots of options.
Let me I'm just going to paint a picture of how I imagine this is going. So I really like his trainer, Gajewski. I would call him like the overall trainer, the front man. But then there's going to be this whole team of Indian dudes with supercomputers behind him. We all know, we don't know exactly who their names are, but we know they're there. Right? We know this team is out there. And what I imagine is they're feeding him interesting ideas. And he is going to be practicing those, sparring those positions out to get a sense of how to play those. And I think the problem for Ding is he's going to have the super analysis of these weird moves like H6 in his pocket. And he's going to have some practical experience with those positions. And my intuition is that we're going to see that almost every game. So in previous world championships, somebody's got some fallback openings that they use a bunch. I wouldn't be surprised if he's doing something different every single game as black and throwing, of course, different looks as white too. So I think it's going to be very unbalanced from the way Gukesh's team is going to approach the openings in this match.
That's a pretty wild prediction that would also lead to a pretty wild match.
Yeah. No, I think it wants to throw him off balance, and he's so good at calculation that he just wants those nasty positions where he can think so well and come up with, and it's so hard when you're not young anymore and you don't have the ability to just sit and think like an animal like this guy's been doing recently,
Right. You've covered so much, Jesse. I want to respond to one thing from a little while back.
Yeah.
When I asked about weaknesses, you mentioned the time pressure, not necessarily as a weakness, but as a special thing that he does. And when I saw the change in time control, I thought this is potentially a problem for Gukesh or like a slightly dangerous spot. Mm-hmm. In general, when you shorten time controls, it's going to favor younger players, right? Which is another thing I don't like about FIDE doing this. But like we're going to get more and more teenagers just raking the old guys over the coals if they keep speeding up the time controls. But Gukesh specifically not. This is not a dude who is rated 3,400 on chess.com and plays like blitz all day and night. And he's not a, so to speak, practical player who likes to just play like decent looking moves on intuition and put pressure on his opponent by playing quickly and let them worry about stuff, right? This is somebody who tries to play to an extremely high standard and uses a lot of calculation. And he's comfortable getting really low on time. So far, it's almost never hurt him. The one exception, I think, a key game he lost to Fallujah in the candidates. Was a mad time scramble where he was up a piece and lost instead of winning the game.
True, yeah.
That was pretty dramatic. Other than that, I've seen him get away with it dozens of times.
Right.
However, almost every time I've seen him play was with 30-second increment. Unlike us, Jesse, like we could switch to 42 maybe because it's somewhere back in our bones and our dinosaur brains.
Yeah.
Like Gukesh basically has never played without an increment in his life. He's too young.
Yeah.
So if you combine like his willingness to go down to 2 or 3 minutes on move 23 to look at some crazy calculation, and then there's no increment and you got to get to move 40, and he's not particularly a strong blitz or rapid player, I would say if the match went to rapid chess, his advantage is gone, by the way, in terms of scenarios where Ding could win. I think in the case of a 7-7 match, you go into the tie breaks, I might even favor Ding. Like it will really flip. First of all, Ding will have played well enough to go 7-7 in classical, and then Gukesh is not as good in rapid. I think you would have to actually, the more I think about it, you'd have to think Ding would be the favorite if they went to a tiebreak. So Gukesh, without that 30-second increment that he's comfortable getting away with, I'm not sure that he makes it through moves 30 through 40 every time if he puts himself in a risky situation.
Yeah, fair.
All right, and then we've got the impact question. We asked this last time.
Wait, can I say, can we do one more thing before I do the impact? So I just want to mention the big elephant in the room is Ding's mental state. And I think he is projecting a message of what we would call depression. Is it depression? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to read. There's not a lot of clarity there, but something is definitely going on that sounds like depression. And that depression has definitely affected his confidence. So one thing I just want to stress in my experience as a chess fan and a chess player is when the confidence goes, it's very difficult. It is very difficult to play without confidence. So to me, that's one of the huge stumbling blocks for Ding here. It's not just that his chess has been poor recently. It's that he has zero confidence. And so I just want to put it out there is that if he doesn't somehow find a way to regain the confidence, it's going to be a massive blowout. And this $200,000 a game thing is really going to start to roll. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there.
No, it's definitely a good point. I talk about this on stream a lot. It's kind of a meme, but it's like people don't realize how much chess is a mental game because you kind of feel like it's all mental, but it's mental in the sense that it really depends on your state and your form. You have to be in a good mindset to play well. Like it's really crucial.
Yeah, and that final tick of focus or concentration or belief in what you're doing.
Right.
like without that, it's like almost like you lose hundreds of points of your strength. It's like you're not there. It doesn't matter that you know a lot of stuff. You're just like a normal dude. But Kostya, before we get off the board, I actually wanted to hear what you thought about Jesse's opening predictions. His idea that Gukesh is going to try and win with black and that he's going to hit and run with both white and black, switching up openings basically 12 games in a row. What do you have any thoughts about that match strategy and what you expect from Gukesh in the opening?
It certainly seems possible. I think if I was Gukesh's coach, I would be suggesting him to just play solid. Personally, if I'm on Team Gukesh, I'm kind of a little bit afraid because I don't know like what kind of ding is gonna show up. And for me, actually, whenever I play someone OTB and I don't really know a lot about them, you know, they might be underrated, they might be really strong online, like who knows. It's only until they start like show up and start playing moves that I realize like, okay, this is a strong player. Like, oh, okay, this person is playing as their rating would suggest they should play. So I'm like, okay, I'm good now. So I feel like if I'm on Team Gukesh, I just don't know which ding is going to show up. And I would tell him to first be just cautious, like first couple of games. And then obviously if he's, you know, the season opportunity, he should try to win, but I definitely wouldn't be going out to win as black, like from game one, for example.
Yeah. So, I mean,
it'll be interesting to see. I don't know.
If we look at like the past openings and what they come in with in terms of opening approaches and weapons, right? Gukesh plays hit and run as white already, right? Basically consistently throughout in all formats, right? He's playing E4, D4. He can play C4, knight F3. And even within E4 and D4, he's switching up his variations very frequently, right? With black, a little bit, but less so. Like, for example, against E4, his main weapon has always been E5. And then, like, for 1 year, he had, like, Caro as his backup. Another year, Sicilian as his backup. You know, it's a little bit more of a structure to the black repertoire. And that is fairly consistent, or, I mean, that's illustrative or whatever. It's typical for his generation, for what opening repertoires are looking like now, right? That people are pretty comfortable equalizing with black, so they're trying to have like one or two openings that they know really well with black, as long as they don't like absolutely need to win with black and go crazy, right? And then with white, they're looking to get out of what their opponent's prepared for by sort of switching it up more. It's pretty common. Ding stands out as somebody who's played so little 1e4 and has had a more set repertoire with white, but he's added more and more English into his repertoire as a percentage over the last like couple years, right? He used to be just D4, 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 and then he's been varying his move order. If you look at what Gukesh has faced in the last couple of years, people play amorphous openings against him more than average. Like more than average, you see people thinking like, I'm going to play the Reti or the English or the King's Indian attack against Gukesh. He gets that far more often than straight up E4s and D4s compared to the total percentage of what people are playing against everybody in the field. And even when people play E4 or D4 against him, they often then avoid super critical lines. For example, he played the Sicilian throughout 2024. Nobody played the open Sicilian against him, guys. I looked through all his Sicilian games to see what Sicilian was he intending to play in 2024. I couldn't even find out. So like 15 games in a row, people played some version of knight F3, bishop C4, or knight F3, bishop B5, or knight F3, D3, or just something, you know, knight C3, bishop E2. Like, so
maybe no one wanted to find out either.
No one else wanted to know either. So we don't even know what he would do for sure if Ding played E4 by surprise. Sometimes people come to these matches with like a real new approach, right? If Ding played E4 by surprise, we don't necessarily know what he would do. But in general, what we've seen is people have approached the opening against him playing like knight F3, C4 kind of stuff a lot. And that would also be probably how Ding would be comfortable approaching the match.
Well, and I just want to say a couple things about Ding and openings we should talk as well. So first of all, when Ding was at his very best, he was playing the Catalan and he was great at it. And the problem with the Catalan is this is a good example for us to talk about how Gukesh could approach the opening. Let's just say he does go back to his baby in the Catalan. There's so many different ways for Black to play against the Catalan. It's amazing how many ways there are to play against the Catalan. And that could be just a simple way to illustrate my point, that he could play a different system against the Catalan every single time. Very easy to do.
Different knight c6, rook b8 kind of
so
thing.
many different things.
Yeah.
So many different things, right?
Yeah.
So, but the other thing I want to add to that, though, is I suspect strongly that rapport is still his second, Richard Rapport, right? And he has an effect on Ding's openings, right? If we recall last time we have the famous H3 that he played and lost against Nepo, and it was just a weird move. And Rapport's a weird dude. They get along. They're doing this stuff together. If I was Ding's team, I would want Rapport not to be in some foreign country playing me over Lee chess. I would want him there with me. I would want a whole bunch of other people. But Ding kind of likes to work alone, right? But in any case, what I'm trying to say is, I think what we're going to see is also some weird stuff from Ding, which honestly favors Gukesh if he starts doing some weird H3 stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
let me just point out one strength of Gukesh's that's relevant to what you said about the Catalan. If you give Gukesh the c4 pawn, he's perhaps the best in the world at winning those positions from the Black side. Obviously, nobody just wins them every time with Black. White has compensation. Gukesh is so good at turning that pawn on c4 into a win.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
So it's high risk against him.
Yeah. No, very interesting to see. I think I'm more curious what Gukesh does with White, because Ding, I don't know if you guys mentioned it, but he's very, in the past at least, he was very consistent with Black. Like he was playing the Marshall for just years and years. And he always plays like the same setups, like in the Italian game. I think there's like 150 games where Ding goes queen d8, b8 to a7 in the Italian and draws. It's like Wesley or knock. And then against d4, I think he's like a big, long time Queen's Gambit declined player. Maybe some Nimzo as well.
Yeah.
So that's a super solid repertoire. I mean, and like he's usually very well booked up. So I'll be very curious to see how Gukesh tries to crack him in the opening.
Right.
Yeah, and Ding can hold his own in the Italian game for sure, right? So if he knew that Gukesh was going to play e5, which has been Gukesh's main move throughout his career, if he knew Gukesh was going to play e5, there's no reason he couldn't play e4. But what's he going to do if Gukesh plays the Sicilian? So that not knowing how I would prepare the white side of the Sicilian against Gukesh from Ding's camp, and obviously I'm 100 points away from the level of what these guys are thinking about, but I would think that Ding's not going to play e4 against Gukesh, because I just don't see how you approach the Sicilian against somebody who can play several different Sicilians, and you don't have much experience there.
I could see Ding playing some close Sicilian, especially with that wrapper influence, some knight c3, g3 stuff.
Yeah.
d3, and then you play like knight h3, f4, knight f2, weird setup Gukesh might not have had practice in. I totally relate to people playing these weird setups against Gukesh, because like you just somehow you're afraid of him. You don't want this open position. You don't want to see his prep. You just want a closed game where you can slowly build up your attack and hope he does something weird.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be a great match, even if it isn't a world championship. Come on.
None of us said it wasn't, Jesse.
I don't know if it is. I don't know. Okay.
All right. You guys want to comment on the sponsor? Google?
Yeah.
What does it mean for chess that Google is sponsoring the biggest event of the chess calendar?
I think it's a really cool thing. And I have a theory. This is just my theory. So I think that this guy, Demis Hassabis, who is a chess player from England, who is now, I think, let's say, the most influential person at Google, because he's the head of their AI now. I'm a fanboy of very few people, but this guy I'm a fanboy of. Just a beautiful mind. An example, actually, I think, of a mind that could, like, if you get a young chess education, get that discipline in your head about what chess is, and then use it for other things. And I was just thinking, like, There's been a number of chess players who've gone on to do other things. I think the next in line for somebody who was highly influential in my head was GM Kenneth Rogoff, who went off to do a bunch of economic stuff. And anyways, Demis Hassabis, I think, is probably behind this, and super cool that we have somebody who is a good chess player who is sponsoring a lot of chess stuff. I know he's sponsoring a lot of UK kids. So I think it's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, he's on the surface the dream case of like do chess to a certain level when you're young and then move on. Right. I mean, this year he won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
So he's like done some really great contributions, and he's still contributing to chess in a way while also contributing to all sorts of other things.
Right.
In a way, I mean, the dude AlphaZero changed chess.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty big.
Right.
Pretty
Just
big
there, he had more of an influence than if he'd become a GM and just played all the time.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. No, great that Google is sponsoring. I mean, hopefully sets a nice precedent. Chess doesn't usually have normal corporate sponsors. Hopefully the match doesn't disparage chess, and Google doesn't end up regretting their decision to sponsor a FIDE match.
Yeah.
Right. So ideally, chess doesn't give them Toilet Gate Part 2 or anything like that, because I don't think Google would enjoy that. Right. And hopefully we would get good viewership. I think those would be the two things that they'd be looking for. No scandals, no cheating accusations, no potty stories, plus good viewership. So
viewership is going to be amazing. And I think this ties in with the impact question, because I definitely noticed this during the Olympiad when I was like covering and following it. Indian fans are intense. They love their players, and they really show up for Indian players. Right. So I think this is going to be, by numbers, a huge match. I think like so many people in India are going to follow it. Yeah. And then if Gukesh wins, I think that's going to be very good for chess.
Yeah.
We were talking about who we wanted to win last time between Ding and Nepo, between like who could create more interest. And last time we were rooting for Ding because we thought a Chinese world champion would be better for chess than like a Russian world champion.
We were very close between them, right? And we used that as kind of a tiebreaker. We're like, well, we kind of like them sort of equally. We don't care too much. Nobody's clearly better. We didn't have and I mean, they came out 7-7, right? But we didn't have a clear sense that either of them was stronger than the other in classical chess. And so we thought, well, maybe it'd be cool if we got like a boom in chess interest in China. Has that happened at all?
No.
I would say that was a bit of a bust. I'd say Ding has not been the most inspirational world champion, not just because of his performance, but also like he's not the most charismatic individual either, and doesn't, to me, he seems like a very nice guy. I haven't seen him do a lot to like promote chess and stuff like that.
Right.
So, but if Gukesh wins, then like India just gets rejuvenated. You know, we have like another generation, you know, of like Gukesh's and Prague's and Arjun's, and yeah, I think it'll just elevate interest tremendously.
I agree. Yeah. So in terms of impact, I think if Ding wins, it's monstrous. It's going to set off. The explosion's already happening in India, but this new group of Indian players who are so strong, the country's looking to. He's their representative. Boom! I mean, explosion in numbers. Like, well, people in the Western world can't even imagine how many people there are in India. I can't. When I hear the number, I can't actually picture that many people. But that's how many people who will be following this match.
Yeah. I actually think that whether or not Gukesh wins the match, I think the match is going to be good for India, period. I think that in chess, there's kind of like an organic interest throughout India in chess, right? And so this is just another exciting event to follow. Like the Olympiad was a great event to follow. Each of these events, the interest increases, and there's more, and it just keeps increasing. I don't think they necessarily need to win to inspire the fans. The fans are pumped, and it's just going to keep going. So despite any questions Jesse has about who's world champion, or despite any question anyone has about like, is Ding really up for this? Might this be a blowout? You know, where would we rank this match historically if it becomes a blowout? I would expect really high viewership because of the Indian component. And I think there's one other important historical significance, which is the youngest world champion ever possibility, right?
Yeah.
Kasparov was 22. Gukesh is 18. That's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And it's already astonishing for someone to be a 2,700 super GM by age 18, right? You can count on your hand how many people are going to do that every like 5 to 10 years. It's just going to be a handful of super talents, right?
Right.
It seems. But for them to already be world champion, I mean, it might be a record that's never, ever, ever, ever broken. And I think that's what's at stake for Gukesh, and part of the impact of this match is we could have the youngest world champion ever. And a record that just can't be broken. You know, I mean, Kasparov beat Tal's record by maybe a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certainly left open in your mind, like, well, someone might do it at 21 one day, you know, or 21 and a half or something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
18
mean,
is crazy.
18, I mean, you're like, come on, who's ever going to beat that?
Okay. Well, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, we should talk just a little bit about our coverage.
Yeah.
We forgot to mention we'll be covering the match on our channel. It's a little bit awkward for us because the starting time for each game is going to be 4 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
David and I are in California for the beginning of the match, at least. So it's going to be 1 a.m. for us.
So I'll speak to that. So it's, first of all, one thing it's not clear to me yet is they're probably going to delay it. They're delaying most things just out of a cheating precaution.
I don't think they will.
You don't think they will?
I think the match is too big. You can't delay it, you know, like
I'm hoping they delay it. Anyways, so I'm going to try to get up at 5. Okay. I'm going to try to get up at 5. I might be moving a little slow, but I do want to cover it. And so I'll be there for the first couple hours at the least, and then these guys maybe we can do a handoff later. But I am going to try to be there, and we are going to try to institute a new eval bar, a human eval bar. So we're going to try to make that work too, and maybe David's sometimes a night owl, dude. It's conceivable that he just stays up and maybe covers that first hour, and then I get there.
Oh yeah,
or something
Jesse.
like that.
I think that's the plan. I'll kick it off.
All right, there we go.
I'll kick it off so we won't miss anything of the start.
Yeah.
Then you can take over when you get up.
Yeah.
And
beautiful, dude. Beautiful. Yeah.
Maybe Kostya, I don't know if you prefer to stay up late with me or be there for like the third handoff and take the baton from Jesse when he gets tired.
Yeah, so I think I might be able to join David for the beginning because I'll start like 1 a.m. Lately I've been going to bed a bit late, so I feel like, you know, I'll nap it up. I'll take a nap.
All right.
All right. And then, but the interesting thing for me is I'm going back to St. Louis during the match. So after the first couple of games, so I think I'll start off with David, and then once I'm on Central Time, then I'll just join Jesse when I wake up.
Right.
Because that'll be 3 a.m. Yeah, no way I'm doing 3 a.m.
All right.
But I'll join Jesse maybe once it's like 2 hours in or so.
So are we going to cover the whole thing?
Yeah, let's do it, dude. Let's do it.
I think that's the plan. Yeah.
Okay. And are we going to use engines to tell us what's going on?
No way, boss. Dojo way.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I don't think we will on stream. I might use the engine when I'm following the game, you know, just randomly, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay. So you would be awake following the game, but not covering it?
There's a chance. Okay. Unlikely. No, but I'm very excited, and hopefully people tune in. I think we should also do some kind of pod. Honestly, I would do one like every rest day. I feel like that's a good, and just like discuss the match.
Okay. All right, you guys. Go ahead.
Do you think that we will provide the best coverage of the World Championship match this year?
Yes.
Coverage options out there?
Yes, I do.
Live coverage. Yeah, I think we'll definitely give the best analysis. I would, and I'm sure there'll be video. We won't have video, but I'm sure there'll be video available. So I think the win for fans will be to get the video feed, mute that, and then watch us as we're covering the games live.
That sounds about right to me. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching or listening to our podcast. We will be continuing to pump out more podcasts because we've been on a streak here.
Yeah.
So stay tuned and let us know, for those of you who are patrons, let us know what topics you want us to cover. And we'll see you all around for the World Championship match.